Hello Saints, welcome in for another video here in the middle of the week. I want to do something a little different today, maybe the next few weeks, I don't know. I want to take a look at the Beatitudes. You can find them, the best source for them is in Matthew chapter 5. And I like how Bob Mumford, when he would teach on the Beatitudes, he called them the Constitution and bylaws of the kingdom of God. And we also point out that these are B-attitudes, or attitudes that we should have and that we should be. We're only going to cover the first one today, and we'll see what happens next week. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." There's probably not a more misunderstood beatitude than this one. And, it's no accident that Jesus starts with this one, because once we understand what he's talking about, then all the rest of the Beatitudes make sense. Now, we ask questions when we think about blessed are the poor in spirit. We ask questions like, is this a feeling that we are of no worth or value? Some people, they communicate that being poor in spirit is being of no value. Is it a feeling or an absence of a self-image? And by that I mean an image that God made. I'll come back to that. Is being poor in spirit being shy or backward? Obviously, it's none of those. Being poor in spirit is not to be of no value, because God so loved the world that he gave his son to purchase mankind. And so we have high value. You and I are both made in the image of God, and so the self-image is not really a self-image, it's a God image that he made us into his image. He put his stamp on us and gave us his image. Being poor in spirit is not weak, as we consider weakness. It's not being a doormat, being walked over. It's not. Some people think that being quiet is being poor in spirit. It's not necessarily true. And of course, we need to say this, that being poor in spirit is not financial destitution. You could be so broke you couldn't pay attention, and you could still not be poor in the spirit, because it's about your spirit, not about your wallet. Being poor in spirit is recognizing that we are naturally deficient in and of ourselves before God. Being poor in spirit, recognizes that we bring nothing to the table. We just bring ourselves, and God takes it from there. It's a poverty in our spirit apart from the provision of God. In other words, apart from God's provision, we lack. We don't really have what we need. Paul wrote, he said, "Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses," or my deficiencies, "so that Christ's power may rest in me." Because he went on to say, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." What does that mean? Well, when I'm weak, I am strong, because when I'm weak, I get myself out of God's way, and God makes me strong. And I boast in my weaknesses, because that's when his power can rest upon me. God's not going to fight with you, and he's not going to fight with me, but as we acquiesce to his power, then he comes in. When we come to the end of our own abilities and our gifting, and we declare ourselves weak or deficient before God, recognizing that we are deficient before God, it's then that he imparts his strength to us, and we're able to live in the victory that he purchased instead of some false manufactured one. God said, "My power is made perfect or complete in weakness." Now, again, we're not talking about mealy mouth. We're not talking about somebody who's walked over or a doormat. We're talking about someone who's laid their life down in humility. The fact is, there is a wealth to be found in poverty of spirit, and a deficiency to be found in being rich in ourselves. If we are majoring on our gifts or majoring on what we think we're successful at or what we're good at, we're rich in ourselves, but we're still deficient. But if we recognize that we are poor in spirit because we as human beings bring nothing to the table, then there's a wealth of God's power and resources and grace available to us. Sometimes we're lulled into a false sense of aptitude because God has given us abilities and gifts and talents. And sometimes we lean on those gifts to the exclusion of God's power. We rely on those gifts. And may we never become so proficient in the operation of our gifts that we become lost in the exercising of that gift and forget from whom it was bestowed. But being poor in spirit is coming up short and knowing it. Coming up short, recognizing that we are deficient. Recognizing we bring nothing to the table. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 4:7, he said, what do you have, and I'm asking you today, what do you have that God hasn't given you? All you have, Paul writes, is from God. Why boast as though you have accomplished something on your own? I'll read that again. What do you have that God hasn't given you? And if all you have is from God, then you know that you can remove the word if. Why boast as though you have accomplished something on your own? Again, this is not putting ourselves down. This is not being critical of ourselves. This is not seeing ourselves as less than, because we were important enough to God for him to send his son to purchase us. But it's a posture. It's a position that we assume of humility before God and a recognition of our inability to bring anything to the table. And when we recognize that, then we move ourselves out of the way and God's power can rest on us. Paul writes to the 2 Corinthians, it is not that we think we can do anything of lasting value by ourselves. In other words, he's basically saying, we the apostles cannot do anything of lasting value by ourselves. He went on to say, our only power and our only success come from God. I hope we can understand, and I hope you can understand what it means to be poor in spirit. If you've been putting yourself down, if you've been seeing yourself as a lower value, if you've been seeing yourself as less than, I pray that you stop that, because that's not how God sees you. Being poor in spirit, it's just recognizing the fact and then allowing God's power, God's grace, God's provision to come into our lives and then enable us to do and be what he's called us to do and be. Now you have a great week, have a great day, and then go out there and act like somebody. Good day.